There's a specific stall that happens after the grief of retirement starts to lift. Not the hard grief. The one that hits in the first weeks when the calendar goes quiet and the phone stops. This is the quieter one that comes after. You're not in crisis anymore. You're just not moving. And the strange part is, you've tried. You looked into volunteering. You took up something you always meant to try. Maybe you traveled, and none of it landed the way you expected it to. Not because you were ungrateful. Not because you weren't trying hard enough. Because nobody told you where the first brick actually goes. That's not a gap in your motivation. That's a gap in what anyone ever required someone to explain to you, and that's what today is. Here's the thing that almost nobody names out loud about the blank slate of retirement. It doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like a test, and the reason that feeling is so disorienting is that it's actually the rational response to what just happened. For somewhere between 30 and 40 years, your career did something that had nothing to do with your job title. It organized your existence. It told you when to wake up. It told you where to be and when. It gave you problems worth solving and people to solve them with. It handed you, every single morning, a reason to get up and a measure of whether the day was worthwhile. And then, on a date that was circled on a calendar, it stopped. You lost a structure that was quietly running in the background of your identity for decades. And the blank slate that appeared when that structure ended, that's not an invitation to explore. Not yet. First, it's a disorientation. And the disorientation is real because what you lost wasn't just a title or a paycheck or a daily routine. It was a whole set of invisible psychological functions that the job was performing. Functions that nobody named while they were happening, because they didn't need to be named while they were happening. Research on what work provides beyond income has been consistent for decades. The finding that keeps appearing is this. People don't just grieve the work itself when they retire. They grieve 5 specific things the work was quietly providing. And most people have never been asked to name which one they miss most. That's where the stall actually lives. Not in a lack of options. In a lack of diagnosis. So let's name the 5 things. Not abstractly. In plain terms that you'll recognize from your own experience. The first is structure. Not just a schedule, a scaffold. A shape to the day that made decisions automatic. You didn't have to choose how to spend Tuesday at 9 a.m. Tuesday at 9 a.m. was already spoken for. When that scaffold disappears, the simplest decisions, what to do this morning, whether this afternoon was well spent, can become strangely exhausting. That's not laziness. That's what happens when a structure that was invisible becomes suddenly absent. The second is competence. For most of your career, you were good at something. Probably very good. You had a domain where your judgment was trusted, where you knew more than most people in the room, where the work confirmed regularly that you were capable. Retirement doesn't just end the work. It ends the daily confirmation that you're competent. And for people who spent 40 years being excellent at something, that loss is quieter than grief. But it runs surprisingly deep. The third is belonging. Not friendship exactly, though sometimes that too, but the particular belonging that comes from being part of something with stakes. A team. A mission. A place where your presence mattered to the outcome. The fourth is contribution. The sense that what you did today mattered beyond you, that your effort moved something forward, for the organization, for a client, for a colleague, for something larger than the day itself. This one is subtle, but for a lot of people, it's the one that leaves the deepest silence. And the fifth is status. Not in a vain sense, in the most human sense. A sentence you could say when someone asked. A position that communicated, without further explanation, that you had earned your place. I'm a nurse. I'm a project manager. I ran the department. Those 5 things, structure, competence, belonging, contribution, status, didn't come from your career. They came through your career, and when the career ended, all 5 of them went quiet at the same time, which means the blank slate isn't just empty. It's empty in 5 specific ways. Now let's look at why the advice you've already tried probably hasn't worked, and what that actually reveals. Here's the mechanism behind why generic advice tends to fail. And this is the part that nobody explains. Not the advisors, not the articles, not the well-meaning family members who said, you should travel more. When someone suggests a hobby, a volunteer role, or a part-time pursuit, what they're actually doing is suggesting a new activity. What they're not doing, what they almost never do, is asking which of those 5 functions you actually need to replace. And those are not the same question. If what you lost most acutely was belonging, the sense of being part of something with other people who needed you there, then a solo hobby won't heal that. It might be enjoyable, it might be genuinely good for you, but it won't fill the specific silence it's aimed at, because belonging isn't replaced by activity. It's replaced by context, a place where your presence matters to someone else. If what you lost most was competence, the daily confirmation that you're excellent at something, then passive travel won't reach it either. New experiences can be wonderful, but they don't tend to restore the particular satisfaction of being skilled. The function mismatch is why people try things earnestly and walk away feeling like something still isn't working, and then quietly conclude that maybe they're just not someone who adapts well. That conclusion is wrong. And this is the thing worth carrying out of today. You were never just looking for something to do, you were looking for what the job was actually doing for you. The specific psychological functions it was running quietly in the background of your identity for decades. And now, for the first time, you have a name for each one of them. That changes the search entirely. You're not looking for the right hobby anymore. You're looking for the right function. And a function can be served by hundreds of different contexts, most of which have nothing to do with finding a second career or reinventing yourself in some dramatic way. The first step is simply knowing which one you're actually missing. That's the answer to why the advice didn't land. It was solving for the wrong variable. If what's in this video opens something you want to go further with, there's a resource in the description built exactly for this work. It's an 8-week guided workbook designed specifically for what comes after the grief. The part where you know you're ready to build something, but the blank slate still isn't giving you a starting point. It walks through each of the 5 functions with guided questions and weekly exercises, structured so that you're not trying to figure out the destination before you've taken the first step. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. So here's the framework. Not a list of things to try. A diagnostic sequence that leads to a real first move. Step 1 is the only thing that matters right now. Go back to those 5 functions: structure, competence, belonging, contribution, status, and ask yourself honestly which one has been the loudest absence. Not which one sounds most important. Which one you actually feel missing. For some people, it's obvious. The house feels too quiet, too unstructured, and every morning starts with a low-grade question. What am I supposed to be doing right now? That's structure. For others, the absence that stings most is social. Not loneliness exactly, but the specific feeling of being needed somewhere. That's belonging. For others still, it's the slow erosion of the sense that they're excellent at something. The days pass, they're pleasant enough, but nothing in them confirms that this person is capable. That's competence. There's no wrong answer, there's only the honest one. Step 2 is this: identify one low-stakes context where that function could exist. Not a permanent commitment. Not a reinvention, one context. If you identified belonging, one organization, one group, one regular gathering where your presence would matter to the people there. If you identified competence, one situation where you could use what you built over 40 years, even informally. Teaching, advising, mentoring, consulting. The form doesn't matter, the function does. If you identified structure, one external commitment that creates a scaffold for at least 2 or 3 days a week. Something that makes Tuesday at 9 a.m. spoken for again. Step 3, and this is the permission that most people never give themselves. Call it a 30-day experiment, not a decision. You are not choosing your purpose. You are not selecting your post-career identity. You are testing one hypothesis about one function for 30 days. That's all. If it doesn't work, and it might not, that's not failure. That's data. The people who rebuild purpose after retirement rarely arrive at the right context on the first try. What they do is start with a real question instead of a vague hope, and they treat the first moves as experiments rather than verdicts. The difference between those two postures is everything. And here's the only thing the next 48 hours actually require. Name the function, not the activity, not the plan, not the 5-year vision, just the function. Write it down if you can. Structure, competence, belonging, contribution, status. One of them is louder than the others right now. That's the first brick. If you want to take what's here further, the 8-week workbook in the description was built for exactly this next step. The link is there and in the pinned comment. So here's where we've arrived. The blank slate that follows the grief of retirement doesn't feel like freedom at first. And now you know exactly why. It's not a character flaw. And it's not ingratitude. It's the rational response to losing a structure that was quietly running the background of your identity for decades. Generic purpose rebuilding advice tends to fail because it replaces activities, not the 5 specific psychological functions that the career was providing. Structure, competence, belonging, contribution, status. You can't rebuild what you haven't named, and the stall most people experience isn't about not trying hard enough. It's about solving for the wrong variable. Now you know the right one. The first step doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be permanent. It has to be aimed at something real, a specific function, a low-stakes context, a 30-day experiment rather than a lifelong commitment. That's a completely different starting point than a blank slate. That's a question you actually know how to begin answering. There's a version of this chapter that a lot of people never fully step into, not because they didn't want to, but because they kept waiting for the map before they took the first step. The map doesn't come first. The first step is the map. And you now have what you need to take it. That's one less thing to carry. I'll see you in the next one.